Chapter 31. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After their much-earned 3 days' rest, the Johan 1st Battalion assembled in the training grounds refreshed and excited. The flushed looks on their faces says it all. They have been enhancing their physiques for many weeks and they were already raring to experience real combat. Lying in front of them were the new equipment brought by Kulda and his men, the logistics unit. Exorthar then signaled his men, the battle band, who are in charge with relaying commands, signaling the army as well as waking them up early in the morning. The Johan warriors hated the members of the battle band during the early days of their hell-like training, mostly the Galuks who weren't accustomed to waking up so early in the morning. Specifically, the one they hate the most would be the one sounding the reveille or wake-up call that tells them to get their asses up and prepare for training. It was common for the once in charge of the wake-up call to hastily scamper away after sounding the reveille since the angry orcs disturbed from their slumber would be after them quickly. There were times that the unlucky ones got roughened up by the pissed-off warriors, which is why the battle band members sounding the wake-up call would always run away after rousing the sleeping orcs awake. There were even times that they would hastily run away as soon as they saw a warrior angrily staring at them and not bothering to finish the reveille. The Black Tortoise Group and Vermilion Bird Group were given the 3/4 of a meter long stabbing sword and the large rectangular shield, while the Azure Dragon Group and White Tiger Group were armed with the shorter 8 feet long pure iron spear and the same large shield. In the past 3 days, Xiao Chen had taught the main group commanders the drills to be done to train his men. The new battle line formation, strategy, maneuvers, tactics and way of fighting. The phalanx sure was sturdy, strong and effective, but it had the glaring weakness of its weak flanks and very slow mobility. It can also be easily dismantled by enemies that broke through the wall of the spears from within, like the ogres who had a tougher skin and higher vitality. The main reason that Xiao Chen ordered the spears to be shorter and to be made purely of iron was that during the encounter with the ogres, he witnessed how the ogres snapped the shafts of the sarisa like spears with ease with their hands after penetrating their bodies. The longer spears can't withstand the suicidal charge of the ogres, unlike the orcs, since they are more resilient and heavier. Armed with the larger shields, the group commanders then taught their men on how to fight with their new equipment. Unlike the round shields that they previously used, which had a vertical handle, the large rectangle curved shield had a horizontal handle. The horizontal handle allowed its wielder to easily hold it with their left hand stretched downwards. The basic form of fighting stance was then demonstrated by the main group commanders. The torso half down, the knees slightly bended, left leg in front and the knee facing inward, shield in front where the top end lays on the left shoulder, covering the entire body with its size till the shin. You come forward. Sakharin pointed at Magaz, who had a questioning look on his face, but he adhered to the command nonetheless. Tossing a long wooden staff towards Magaz, Sakharin then ordered him to try to strike his legs with it. The unlucky Magaz became the training partner of Sakharin. He thrusted the wooden spear attempting to strike Sakharin's exposed left foot with it. Sakharin then suddenly leaned forward, crouching down and dropping the shield to the ground, deflecting Magaz's attack. Again. Sakharin commanded. Magaz can't understand what was going on, but he still thrusted the staff towards Sakharin's left leg, which Sakharin responded by leaning backward and raising his left leg, avoiding the strike, then leaned forward and dropped down the larger and heavier shield upon the wooden staff. Sakharin's counter surprised Magaz and made him let go of the staff. Now come closer. Sakharin bellowed and only ordered Magaz to stop when he was at an arm's length away from him. Now I'll show you how to attack with the shield. With quick movements, Sakharin struck Magaz's exposed legs with the bottom of his shield lightly, then withdrew. Magaz just stared at him, unable to respond at all. Then suddenly he saw the bottom part of the shield coming towards his face, jerking his head backwards in an attempt to avoid or mitigate the sudden attack with his eyes full of nervousness. Just a few inches more and he would be seeing stars again, but luckily for him Sakharin stopped his attack when his shield was about to touch Magaz's face. That's for the shield. Now with the sword, Sakharin shouted, then picked up a wooden practiced sword. In the new basic fighting stance, the sword was well hidden behind the large shield. Sakharin then leaned forward, the sword coming from above the shield in an overhand strike stabbing towards Magaz, then going back to the initial stance. The next strike then came from right of the shield in an underhand strike. Sakharin demonstrated the available attacking styles when equipped with the large shields. Magaz just stood there like a log, unable to react nor moved when Sakharin demonstrated the stabbing attacks. Magaz thought that he would be in pain again just like when he fought the chief. Sure, the sword use was made of wood, but it could still deal a lot of pain when it hits. That's how you fight with these shields. Any questions? Sakharin asked the spectating soldiers with a loud and dignified voice. Panning his gaze left to right then back, Sakharin nodded, then ordered them to get into lines and get themselves equipped with the new gears. Shaking his head after noticing the spacing out Magaz, Sakharin moved towards him with quick steps. Moving to Magaz's left and leaning forward to the spacing out warrior's left ear, "Get yourself together and don't be a disgrace." Sakharin yelled at close range, which made Magaz quickly jerk his body in surprise. Glancing left and right, he saw the look of ridicule of his peers, the knitted brows and angry stare of Sakharin. Filled with nervousness, he quickly fled away from Sakharin and joined the line to get his new gear with unsteady and clumsy steps. Sakharin sighed and shook his head and moved towards his fellow group commanders. "Easy with the greenhorn, he is still young and inexperienced," Gurkhan advised, as he was the one in charge appointed by the chief in checking the background, information and history of each soldier. He hated this responsibility at first but then did it diligently. His additional responsibility enabled him to know the warriors in his command more closely and have a closer relation, much like normal friends with them and not a commander to a subordinate. He knew Magaz was just still a young adult, only at 15 years of age, and still not knowledgeable enough like the others, especially when it comes to keeping his composure. "I guess you're right, but what can I do but to be strict and ruthless with them, greenhorn or veteran? Since it seems that the chief is planning something bigger than we can imagine." Sakharin responded, his voice had a tint of pity on it, his gaze staring at the excited warriors. He followed the chieftain since he is bound by his father's words and honor, and in hopes that the might and prestige of his Archon clan be restored. Betrayal and backstabbing, it was non-existent among the orcs. It was the greatest sin for orcs to betray those who trusted them and backstab those that lent them a hand. A real warrior must stay true to his words at all times. Breaking this tradition would surely earn an orc a sure trip to Gehenna, the land of suffering, torture and humiliation after their death. Shao Qin knew of this, which is why he can be at ease if it is the orcs, but other creatures, especially humans, there is no hell way that he will easily trust their words. An orc warrior must stay true to his words. An orc warrior must not know of betrayal. An orc warrior doesn't shame the gods. An orc warrior doesn't forsake faith. An orc warrior pays back any favors or vengeance. An orc warrior must respect and obey traditions. An orc warrior must not bow to the demons. An orc warrior's honor must not be desecrated. An orc warrior must be tough and strong. An orc warrior must seek the truth. This was the code of life of an orc warrior, handed down from the ancestors of the orcs who first roamed these lands after escaping the destruction of their old world. Chapter 32. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The Black Tortoise and Vermilion Bird group trained with their new equipment, with Sakharin at the helm, guiding and observing them. Whenever Sakharin yelled a command, the soldiers executed it at almost the same time a few times, but they weren't in sync most of the times. There would be those who execute the command earlier or later than the others, which prompted Sakharin to mete out punishments. Shao Chen's strict nature had rubbed off on Sakharin, and the unfortunate warriors under his command were taking the brunt of it. Overhand. Restore. Underhand. Restore. Shield drop. Restore. Shield strike. Restore. Evade. Restore. Push. Restore. Sakharin's stern voice echoed all over the training grounds, his soldiers sloppily trying to keep up with the pace of his commands. From a distance, Gurkhan just shook his head at Sakharin's way of training his warriors. He knew that Sakharin was just trying his best to make those under him to be as strong, skilled and tough as they can be. Gurkhan followed the punished warriors under Sakharin running back and forth carrying with them their equipment. Galamnor's foolish smile caught his attention. The muscle head was enjoying the harsh training very much. All right. White tigers, follow my lead. Gurkhan addressed to his men, then demonstrated the new moves and began drilling his men. The White Tiger group were armed with the new pure iron spear along with the new shield. Their way of attack was similar to those wielding the sword, but they just have a few more moves that were based on the previous phalanx formation. They would be the core of the formation, presenting a forest of spears to their enemies, but unlike the phalanx formation, they were more mobile and can fight separately and aren't restricted to stay together with their peers to be effective in combat. They also had a secondary weapon, which is the main weapon of the Black Tortoise and Vermilion Bird group, the long stabbing swords, but they are no longer equipped with the two throwing spears. Xiao Chen was observing the commanders train their soldiers at their discretion. He had encouraged his commanders to take the initiative more and not solely rely on him, since in the future he won't be around at all times and can't see the situation of his men clearly in the battlefield, unlike his commanders who is up close and personal with the enemies. In an obscure corner of the training ground, Adhalia watched as the Johann 1st Battalion started their new training routine. She somewhat felt relieved that they are now training like how she knew, striking with weapons and not just enhancing their physiques. For 2 straight weeks, the Johann 1st Battalion trained daily, adapting and getting familiar with their equipment. The battle band sounded the attention call upon the request of the chieftain. The beats of war drums and the blasts of the battle horns filled the training ground. The group commanders then directed their men and formed the standard battle line formation, 12 orcs up front and 13 orcs deep. With Xiao Chen giving orders to the battle band, one very long blast of a battle horn sounded, followed by 8 beats of the war drums that had a few second pause in between. Upon hearing the command being relayed by the battle band, the Black Tortoise group quickly changed their formation. 8 additional columns were then formed. The formation shifted from 12 orc frontage to a 20 orc frontage and 8 orcs deep. Xiao Chen designed certain tunes from the battle band to be played to relay general commands. The single long blast from the battle horn was directed to the Black Tortoise group. If it is 2 long blasts of the battle horn, it is for the Azure Dragon, 3 for the White Tiger and 4 for the Vermilion Bird group. Each tune corresponds to a certain command. Xiao Chen designed them as such for his army to be mobile upon the battlefield and to be able to execute more complex maneuvers. A few more weeks of training and getting familiar with the commands, the Johann 1st Battalion were now ready for real combat. With the general map in front of him, drawn by him with the help of the warg riders that he sent scouting around the Orcish land near the burning sands. The locations of the tribes were marked down on the map, including the terrains around it, whether it was a plain, hills, streams, etc. Xiao Chen must know the surrounding terrains in order for him to plan safe routes and come up with certain strategies to tackle their enemies. With the information brought by the scouts that he had sent out, he was glad that he had decided to reform the structure of his army earlier, since the terrain to the east further from the previous location of the Galuk tribe was riddled with hills and rocky paths. The tight phalanx formation wouldn't have been effective in such a terrain and their cohesiveness would have been compromised. According to the scouts, there were 2 tribes close to them. The Falcon Feather tribe to the northeast and the Stone Viper to the east, just a little further from the original location of the Galuk tribe. After 4 days of rest in order for his warriors to relax their sore muscles a little bit and packing the necessary supplies, the Johann 1st Battalion sortied out from the Johann tribe. Shields held on their left and their swords sheathed on their scabbards, which was attached to their waist with the help of a fine leather belt designed by their chieftain. The spear wielders held their spears on their right hand, clutching it 3/4 down the shaft, the longer part raised high up, like they were trying to pierce the clouds up above. 4 columns of warriors marched forward, divided into their groups and platoons. The first platoon of the Black Tortoise group marched at the forefront, commanded by Sakharin, followed by the second platoon under the lead of Galamnor. There was an almost 8 feet distance between each platoon. Disciplined and orderly they marched forward. 4 platoons up front, then followed by the Therians pulling wagons of supplies and extra equipment at the center of the marching line being handles by the logistics group under the lead of Kulda. Keep the Therians in line. Kulda shouted towards his men handling the Therians as they pulled the heavy wagons. He was guiding those under him to keep the Therians close to the platoon that they are following and keeping the creatures of burden at the same pace as the marching warriors. Just in front of the first platoon belonging to the White Tiger group, Xiao Chen rode on a wagon with no equipment or supplies on board. The wagon carried an elongated thick slab of wood which served as a table to Xiao Chen. On the makeshift table was the map that Xiao Chen had made with the information provided by the scouts, fastened to the makeshift table by small iron pins. Xiao Chen was in deep thoughts, his eyes staring intently at the map in front of him, committing every detail into his mind. Across him was the curled-up Grogus who was being closely watched by Eroshana. The chinking sounds of her battle axe as she tries to sharpen its edges with a piece of whetstone was making Grogus have second thoughts of his idea in attempting to jump down from the wagon and make his escape. Eroshana glanced at curled-up Grogus, then smirked at him, "Sneaky bastard. I'm waiting," she said, tempting Grogus to make his escape before continuing on sharpening her battle axe. Grogus' eyes trembled, he lowered his head between his short legs, then hugged his knees with his arms, curling into a ball. He started to distract himself by thinking of food recipes that he had done and possible recipes that he can create, trying to get Eroshana's smirking face out of his mind. Chapter 33. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After a few days' march east of the original location of the Galuk tribe, towering trees greeted the marching formation of the Johan 1st Battalion. The trees hindered their ability to march in a straight line. Ready, steady, halt. Sakharin halted the march as he wasn't sure on how to proceed forward through the towering trees. One by one the succeeding platoons were halted by their commanders after noticing the platoon in front of them standing in place. Black Wind. Sakharin called for his trusty partner. A few moments later a huge wolf appeared from within the forest. Standing majestically with its black fur that shone with the help of the bright rays of the sun. Some spots of her fur were filled with leaves and grasses, her paws covered with mud. Mounting on his warg, Sakharin urged her towards where the chieftain was. Snarling at Sakharin a bit because she felt abandoned this past few days, her partner hadn't ridden her and ignored her and favored walking on his own legs among his troops. "Don't be like that. You will always be my only mount. You will always be my trusted partner." Sakharin leaned forward towards Blackwind's furry ears and whispered while caressing her soft black fur. He somewhat succeeded in pacifying partner, holding tightly on her thick black fur. Blackwind sprinted forward towards where the chief was at. Upon noticing Sakharin, who is now mounted on Blackwind, Xiao Chen got himself down from the wagon. "Why did we stop?" Xiao Chen asked, with his hands getting close to Blackwind's snout and softly petted her nose. The warg enjoyed the chief's petting and even rubbed her snout on the chieftain's hands. "A forest is up ahead, my chief. The warriors won't be able to march on a straight line and normal formation through the dense trees, and I need your decision on how do we proceed." Sakharin answered, then felt puzzled at Blackwind's actions. It was a common knowledge among the orcs that no one can touch another orc's warg except for the one or accepted to ride her or him and still kept their hands attached to their bodies. The chieftain's feat of successfully petting Blackwind despite being his mount was the first time that Sakharin witnessed such a thing, since even his father's warg never allowed him to touch him after the many years that it was around him. His father's warg would always snarl at him angrily, displaying its sharp fangs at him every time that he attempted to touch it. There was even a time when his father's warg swept at him with its sharp claws and giving him deep wounds on his back. Reform into a columns and proceed forward with caution, enemies might be lurking just behind the trees. Xiao Chen spoke after thinking for a few minutes and enjoying Blackwind's soft fur on his hands. Sakharin just stared at his chieftain's hand and on his warg. He was preparing himself to stop Blackwind if she suddenly tries to attack the chief, but contrary to what he was cautioning against, Blackwind even moved towards the chief and rubbed her body on the chieftain and licked his hands like she does with him on some occasions. Okay, that's enough for now," Xiao Chen chuckled as Blackwind's tongue tickled his hands. Signaling for the battle band to relay the command, blasts from the battle horns and sounds of beating war drums gave the command. Shifting their formation quickly, Orc warriors formed an 8-man frontage and stretched longer than before. "Remember. Keep your guards up, we never know what's hiding behind the tree lines," Xiao Chen reminded Sakharin as he boarded back on the wagon and continued on his seep thoughts while staring at the pinned map. Grogus glanced left and right, trying to get a general idea of where they are. The towering trees soon came into his view, thick trunks which had roughly about 4 times the thickness of Galamnor's thighs, messy branches that embraced the thick trunks which seemed to be reluctant to be distanced away from the trunk. Like a lover to his beloved who was reluctant to let go from their embrace, fully enjoying the warmth and feel of each other. While Grogus was observing the surrounding terrain, he soon caught sight of Death's cold eyes. Eroshana was staring at him with wicked and cold eyes, and on her lips was a provoking smile. Her battle axe now rests on her lap whose edges gleamed with sharpness now and then. Grogus' thoughts of making a run for it quickly diminished as he was reminded of the still unhappy female orc that was keeping a close eye on him. Curling himself into a ball by hugging his knees and keeping his head lowered, Grogus went back to keeping himself busy thinking about food recipes. Eroshana snorted at him and felt dejected that the little goblin didn't do what she expected. The Johan 1st Battalion resumed their march, venturing into the forest. Their guards up and ready for any danger that might befall on them. Orcs from other tribes was the least of their concern since ambushes were considered to be an act of cowardice among them. What they were expecting to suddenly attack them would be the strong and resilient ogres, the pesky little creatures like the one that cooks the chieftain's meals, or the other predatory creatures who made the forest their home like the Dargans, Balfurs, and the other wild beasts native to this place. When the Johan 1st Battalion was deep in the forest, Sakharin spotted a silhouette of a small creature up ahead. Straining his eyes to identify the creature, he soon caught sight of its physical features. Short stature, barely 5 feet tall, grayish-colored skin, slanted eyes like a snake, short hands that ended with claws, hooked nose which had a little golden hoop dangling on it, a bat-like ears which had golden earrings attached on it, and a much bulkier build than Grogus. "A hobgoblin!" Sakharin softly muttered and gave command to halt the march. Urging Blackwind forward, who snarled at him angrily when he dismounted off of her. He wants to try communicating with the hobgoblin standing in their path. Keek. Orc warrior. Halt. That's the closest you could get. Or my blade shall not show mercy. The hobgoblin threatened in Orcish tongue as he brought forward his ancient-looking sword. It was a 2-handed sword that had some chips on its edges but still can deal fatal wounds. Sakharin tightened his legs on Blackwind's sides and patted her on her back to command her to stop. Staring at the hobgoblin proudly standing there with his blade on its shoulder, Sakharin waited and just observed the surroundings up ahead. He caught glimpse of the silhouettes of the pesky little creatures behind the tree lines, armed with primitive weapons like wooden clubs and rocks, but there were also those among them that were armed with iron weapons and small bucklers. "You must pay a fine. Kk.to pass King Jaddal's road, Keek. The goblin king of this forest," the hobgoblin shouted towards Sakharin and stomped its right foot on the ground 3 times before yelling, "Ja.addle. Ja.addle. Ja.addle." The goblins hiding behind the tree lines soon made their presence known, chanting their goblin king's name and waving their weapons in the air, some even banging their bucklers with their weapons. Taking in as much of the details as he could get, of those blocking their path who were dumb enough to let their presence be known, Sakharin estimated that there were thousands of them, probably around 3,000 or maybe more, since he suspected that there might be more hiding themselves up ahead. Urging Blackwind to go back to the Johan 1st Battalion and report to the chief what he had seen, Sakharin glanced behind him and caught sight of the jeering smile of the hobgoblin who was still fearlessly standing in their path. Xiao Chen moved to the forefront after the march stopped for a long time and caught sight of Sakharin and Blackwind coming back. "What's up ahead?" Xiao Chen questioned as he could hear some almost inaudible sounds from up ahead. "Goblins, chief. Thousands of them, hiding behind the tree lines." A hobgoblin is asking us to pay a fine to get passed by. They are under the command of a goblin king who they call Jaddle. What are your orders, chief? Sakharin reported and waited for the chieftain's decision on how should they deal with the goblins. The orc warriors nearby also heard the mention of goblins up ahead, and there are thousands of them. They were excited and looking forward to engaging with the goblins to make use of what they have learned in training. They were anticipating a great battle to ensue and can't wait to finally have a taste of real combat with what they have learned, especially the Galuks who were eager to prove their worth to the chieftain. Chapter 34. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Missions: Goblin Slaying * Kill the common goblins reward. 1 point / goblin * kill the hobgoblins reward. 100 points / hobgoblin * kill the goblin commanders reward. 1000 points / goblin commander * kill King Jaddle the goblin king reward. 5000 points failure. 5000 points. Army morale lowered by 10%. Just like that, the system issued Shao Chen a series of missions to be accomplished. Glancing at the eager faces of the warriors under his command, he can't help but form an interested smile upon his lips. Warriors of Johan. For many weeks. You have suffered. For many weeks. You have endured. Now. I present to you a battle to test your mettle. A battle to prove that the suffering you went through wasn't in vain. The chieftain's loud voice filled with authority echoed through the trees. It was one of the rare times that he spoke to the Johan 1st Battalion as a whole. Awoo! 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 His warriors replied with excitement, raising their shields and weapons in the air. They were all longing to see blood, anxious to feel their blood rush through their veins at great speeds again, which they can only feel when they are engaged in real combat. Enemies. We have plenty of them. Just up ahead. Hiding behind the trees and bushes. Ready your weapons. Secure your shields. Warriors of Yohan. To a festival of slaughter. We go, Shao Chen bellowed after his warriors quieted down. Arming himself with the iron spear and the large shield, he soon gave command. Taking the White Tiger group with him to bait the goblins into attacking them, while the Black Tortoise and the Azure Dragon group will go through the dense trees and try and surround them. Why leave us behind? Drigana complained as she approached the chieftain. Her face had a look of displeasure and anger. Her eyebrows lowered and pulled together, eyelids squinted, lips curled inwards, the corners of her mouth pointing downwards, her jaws tensed, vertical wrinkles between her eyebrows and her nostrils flaring up. She was displeased with the chieftain's decision of leaving behind her group. She also wanted to participate in the upcoming bloodbath. I need you to defend our supplies, just in case that the goblins try to get past us and decide to raid our supplies. I need someone capable of thwarting this possibility. Don't worry. Your group, I will put at the front line when we siege the lair of the Goblin King Jaddle. Shao Chen tried to explain as clearly as possible to the displeased Drigana, even pointing out the possible routes of those who will attempt to attack the supplies. I'll take your words for it, Chief. But the attack on the lair of the goblins. I want my group to spearhead it, she said, and leaving behind the chieftain before he could make a reply. At loss for words, Shao Chen stared at the back of Drigana getting further and further away before disappearing behind the wagons of supplies. Chief, we'll take your word for it, one of the orc warriors from the Vermilion Bird group said with his eyes filled with anticipation of a great battle. Arranging his army on the attack, they march forward. Shao Chen taking command of the White Tiger 1st Platoon while Gurkhan took control of the 2nd. Protect your necks. 'Cause Johan warriors coming through, Gurkhan bellowed loudly, and the warriors of the White Tiger group repeated his words while banging their shields with their weapons to make their intention clear the hiding goblins. Arranging themselves in a tight square formation in front of the hobgoblins still proudly blocking their path. Their large shields standing in front of them, their iron spears gleamed with danger as they are proudly pointing outwards. Foolish orcs! Lay down your weapons. The hobgoblin yelled at Shao Chen and his warriors, who are taking a defensive formation, ready to slay any enemy that comes within their weapons' reach. Discarding his shield for the moment, Xiao Chen walked forward, an iron spear gripped tightly on his hands. Arching his body backwards, the iron spear over his shoulder and ready for a quick and decisive strike. Like a released arrow from a bowstring, the spear sailed through the air and impaled the hobgoblin who was still proudly standing still, a great target for Xiao Chen's attack. The proud hobgoblin was pinned by the iron spear to the ground, his body twitched a few times before staying still. His pride no longer exists as he is sent to the afterlife by Xiao Chen's attack. Goblins! Come and get 'em! Xiao Chen shouted loudly, his deep voice echoed through the trees. Returning to the tight box formation, protected by the large shields and iron spears that shone with lethality. Keek! Kill! Ki! The goblins' angry voices filled the forest, echoing with great momentum as they walked out from the tree lines. Their numbers in thousands, slowly surrounding Xiao Chen and his warriors to avenge their proud and foolish commander. Warriors of Johan! Heed my call. Don't let the chief kill all of them, Gurkhan suddenly bellowed, and the warriors under his command proudly replied with the response that were accustomed with, "Awo! Awo! Awo!" Their thundering response just fueled their rising bloodlust even more as they tightened their grips upon their weapons. From all directions, the goblins charged at their formation with great momentum under the lead of their hobgoblin commanders. Hold! Hold! Hold the line! Xiao Chen bellowed as they braced themselves against the impact of the numerous goblins' charge from all directions. You heard the chief, hold the line. Gurkhan yelled to boost the morale of the White Tiger group. Awo! 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 The White Tiger group shouted with great enthusiasm as they held their ground, pushing back the goblins with their shields as they charged at them. Xiao Chen glanced at his warriors and judged that they have finally stabilized their formation. He quickly gave command, push. He yelled and he rammed his shield to the unlucky goblin standing in front of him, knocking it back. The poor goblin stumbled back as it was dazed and surprised by Xiao Chen's sudden counter-attack. Following upon his actions, the White Tiger group pushed away the goblins with their shields and pierced the closest goblin with their iron spears, impaling the unlucky goblin with multiple spears. Don't let chieftain kill more than you! Gurkhan bellowed as he thrusted his spear forward and piercing an unlucky goblin through its mouth. The White Tiger group kept their formation tight and solid as they repelled the goblins, knocking them back with their shields and piercing them with their durable spears. The White Tiger group operated like a phalanx but against all directions instead of just one direction, repelling and slaughtering any goblins that came too close and personal. Like a well-oiled machine, they slaughtered the goblins that came too close. The Black Tortoise group and Azure Dragon proceeded forward as they moved forward through the tree lines as they encircled the attacking goblins. Chapter 35. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Goblin corpses soon piled up all around Xiao Chen and the warriors of the White Tiger group. Wave after wave, goblins assaulted their tight box formation, clashing against their large shields to get through but to no avail. Within the formation, the orc warriors continuously shifted their formation after each goblin wave. Precise, quick and disciplined maneuvers. The orc warriors at the outermost of the formation was replaced by the one behind him after every assault of the goblin. The swap-out warrior would then be at the center of the formation, catching a breather. Swapping in fresh warriors to replace the ones at the outer part of the formation enabled them to remain steady and strong. The tight box formation stood still and didn't budge at all against the endless wave of goblins. Ready, steady, switch! Xiao Chen kept giving commands as he pushed back the last goblin in front of him with his large shield, knocking it down to the ground before giving it a quick stab on the face, ending the little creature quickly. The new system of fighting of the Johan 1st Battalion enabled them to fight in all directions, unlike the phalanx, which is only effective in engaging on one side only. Key, weaklings, how come you haven't killed them yet? An angry hobgoblin commander angrily yelled at his subordinates as he kicked one of the closest goblin near him due to his frustration. Its gaze was blazing with anger like the dancing fire during a great bonfire. his hooked nose flaring up and his face was twisted and scary like that of a demon. The common little goblins at the bottom of the hierarchy can't do anything against the hobgoblin since he is bigger, tougher and stronger than them. Ki. We saw wagons. Just past the strong orc warriors, a goblin scout rushed in and reported to the angry hobgoblin, its eyes trembling in fear as he watches the hobgoblin approach him. Where are the wagons? The hobgoblin asked. His interest was piqued by the report of the wagons, since wagons means wealth or treasure. Past the fierce orcs, along the path. They are idling around at a place due west of here. The goblin scout answered quickly, fearing that the angry hobgoblin commander might not be pleased with his report. Kulkul. Take 1,000 with you and take those wagons. I want them all, none should be missing, the hobgoblin yelled towards one of the bigger common goblins. It was almost as big as the hobgoblins but yet to evolve into a real hobgoblin. Kulkul rallied 1,000 goblins and sprinted past Xiao Chen and the White Tiger group as they were still busy with the current goblin wave that was upon them. Staring at the back of those goblins that just bypassed them, a small smile emerged from Xiao Chen's lips. He was glad that they aimed for the wagons. The displeased Drigana could at least alleviate her displeasure of being left behind with the help of those goblins. Is that all you got? Gherkin shouted towards the goblins, taunting the spectating hobgoblins who were directing the attack. See this? Not a drop of sweat. We aren't even trying. Am I right, boys? Awoo. 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 Gherkin continued to taunt the hobgoblin commanders as his White Tiger group warriors responded to his taunting. Infuriated, the hobgoblin commander ordered a more massive wave of attack than the previous ones. Thousands upon thousands of goblins descended from behind the tree lines, shouting their shrieking battle cries as they charged forward. That's more like it. Boys. Don't let the chief kill more than us. Gherkin bellowed and chuckled at end of his sentence, with his left hand tightly gripping the handle of his shield, his right clutching his iron spear that dripped with fresh goblin blood. Chaos again ensued as the goblins tried to overcome the large shields to get its wielders within their own weapons range but to no avail. The goblins were shorter than the orcs and the ever-present large shields, keeping them at bay. They were slowly being pierced to death by the iron spears that were thrusted now and then. Xiao Chen was now covered with blood all over his body, his eyes started glowing red. Something was brewing up within his mind, he was thirsting for more blood. He craved to see more blood spilled. Slowly his reasoning became clouded as he yelled a battle cry, moving forward to get more kills, to feel more of the hot blood that splattered his body. The warm blood of his enemies, he wants them all. Gherkin was puzzled by the chieftain's actions. He was slowly separating himself from the formation that he so strictly trained them to follow. Signaling his warriors to cover for the chieftain, the tight box formation slowly inched forward near the chieftain. Relishing at the feeling of the warm blood that soaked his body, Xiao Chen continued on carving a bloody path through his enemies. More. 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 He muttered continuously as he pierced a goblin's torso before carrying its corpse up in the air and flinging it towards the other goblins, his large shield discarded behind him. Battle cries soon sounded from behind the tree lines as the Black Tortoise and Azure Dragon group engaged the goblins among the trees. They slowly pushed them towards the clearing where Xiao Chen and the White Tiger group was at with the help of their shields. They herded the goblins like cattle, the hobgoblin commanders shouting commands to the goblins but to no avail. Their morale was already broken and they are on a full rout. Noticing the arrival of their comrades, the White Tiger group fought with more vigor, slaying any unlucky goblin that came their way. Gherkin was keeping a close eye on the chieftain. He was worried that something might have happened to him. Xiao Chen was standing still and didn't move a muscle, his eyes glowing with intense red as he gazed far into the distance. The goblins were running away from the battlefield just beside him, but it was like he didn't see them at all. He was like a log. He wasn't responding at all anymore, unlike before where he fought with such ferocity that the goblins started distancing themselves from him. Somewhere just past by the battlefield where it was littered with goblin corpses, Drigana saw the goblins charging in with their shrieking battle cries. A smile formed upon her lips and looked to those under her command. Battle formation. The enemies delivered themselves to us. Prepare javelins. She roared in command, with a tint of excitement upon her voice. Grabbing a javelin from one of the warriors near her, she raised it up above her shoulder at a throwing stance. She wasn't aiming for anyone particular, any of the goblins will do. Judging that the distance was sufficient, she threw the javelin which soared through the air with a whooshing sound. Those of the vermilion bird group followed suit and peppered the goblins with their javelins, felling those unlucky enough to be aimed at. After the rain of javelins, the initial charge of the goblins was dissipated, their momentum broken. A wall of large shields welcomed their messy assault. The goblins tried ramming the shields with the use of the momentum of their charge but to no avail, the large shields didn't even budge a little. The bigger and stronger orcs behind the shields just chuckled at their futile attempts. Some goblins tried jumping over the large shields only to be met with a pointed end of a sword. It was no suspense, the goblins weren't able to get through the wall of shields which sometimes opens up only to strike them upon their faces or knees. Eroshana stared at Grogus who was watching the goblins get mercilessly slaughtered by the warriors of the vermilion bird group. Hey, sneaky weasel. Want to help your brethren? She mocked and tempted the little Grogus to do something, so that she can justify her actions of cleaving him into pieces. Grogus just shook his head and continued spectating on what was going on. Humph. You're no fun, Eroshana snorted and joined Grogus in watching the battle happening up ahead. Kulda and those in charge of the logistics just sat back in a relaxing mood, cheering for the warriors of Vermilion Bird as they fell the goblins in great numbers. Kulda and his men were keeping the Therians steady as they watch. Eroshana glanced at them for a brief moment before returning his attention on the goblin by her side. The relentless assault of the goblins upon the wall of shields eased up, they were no longer excited as they were before. The goblins were distancing themselves from the orcs who were hidden behind their shields. Step, march forward, Drigana shouted as she noticed the number of goblins trying to get through their shields less and less. Disciplined and synchronized, the large shields moved forward, inching slowly towards the wary goblins who didn't know what to do anymore. They can't get through the wall of shields, no matter what they did. As the wall of shields advanced, the goblins backpedaled until it became a full rout, the goblins ran away for their lives. Breaking formation, Drigana and her warriors gave chase and fell down the slow-footed ones. They pursued them through the trees and easily killing the goblins who were more focused on retreating and not putting up any resistance at all. Chapter 36. You are listening at novelfull.audio. It's too cold that it burns. Xiao Chen thought, as his vision was filled with nothing but endless white. The vast expanse of thick and white snow and the unending raging hailstorm that roared in anger as the cold north wind passes by him. What is going on? He murmured in his mind. He was like a huge block of ice, motionless and cold. Unable to move a muscle, Xiao Chen just focused his gaze on his surroundings. Behemoths made of blocks of ice were raging all around. They were gigantic creatures that made the ground tremble with each step that they take, their feet sinking deep into the snow and leaving behind profound footprints on the ground only to be covered by thick snow in no time. Xiao Chen spotted some of his brethren. They are orcs, he was sure of it, but he felt that they are somewhat different. They had the same big hulking frames packed with muscles, the ever-present tusks that juts out from their lower lip and the distinct lupin ears. Observing closer, Xiao Chen noticed that they were wearing thick furs of animals, from the northern bears and frost wolves. Their glowing red eyes caught much of his attention, the eyes that radiated with insanity and bloodthirst. He watched the orcs that had glowing red eyes engage the ice behemoths. They exerted so much strength that they were able to knock down the ice behemoths that had a height of around 40 or 30 feet with just their bare hands. They pummeled the ice behemoths with such strength and ferocity that their ice bodies started to crack and fragment in many places. Ojimuka.kagreva.tasmagronolar, the biggest of the orcs with glowing red eyes, shouted. In his two hands were two battle axes that was covered in dried blood. Raising both axes with his arms, he charged forward. He cleaved the ice behemoth with such power with his battle axes that the behemoth's foot fractured to many pieces, making it rain with ice shards. The leader of the orcs shouted in Old Orcish, but magically Shao Chen understood what he meant. Titans nor gods. None shall stop the Red Fist tribe. The orcs dispatched the ice behemoths easily, shattering them to pieces that scattered and melded with the thick snow. The leader of the orcs turned and stared at where Shao Chen was at. Those eyes that shone with blood-red light, oozing with madness and savagery, made Shao Chen have goosebumps all over his body, even though he didn't know if what he is seeing is real or just an illusion. He had seen eyes of many soldiers filled with profound emotions, but none came close to what the orc leader's eyes was radiating. Like a shattered mirror, the world and things that he saw broke into many pieces, and the vast expanse of snow and ice was nowhere to be seen. It was replaced by a magnificent hall that emitted wealth and royalty. Taking a look around, the walls were covered aplenty with precious stones that glimmered every now and then. Looking down at his legs, Shao Chen saw his own reflection, courtesy of the solid gold flooring that was polished carefully. Shao Chen was in awe. The one who lived and owns this place must be someone important and powerful, he thought. He strained his eyes to try and take a glimpse of what is outside this magnificent place through the small window. Shao Chen saw nothing but darkness. Darkness so dark that even his ability as an orc to be able to somewhat see in darkness was useless. Glancing at the insides of the grand hall, he finally noticed a throne at the central edge of the hall, further away from where he stood. The throne shone with blinding light with the help of the precious stones that were embedded on its silver and gold body. Its armrest was patterned after the great reptiles of the old, the gigantic scaled titans that breathed fire and terrorized the skies. Seated on the luxurious throne was a very good-looking humanoid creature. He had a very warm smile that shone like that of the morning sun, a brownish-colored skin with scales covering some part of his cheeks. An antler-like horns which was adorned with golden rings and gems that grew sideways from his temples. His furred torso was dotted with many black spots like that of a leopard. The creature's hands ended with sharp and dangerous claws. He had a furry foot like that of big cats which shone with a clear silver light. Welcome to my humble abode. I am called Ozsh. The great envoy of battle. The creature introduced himself to Shao Chen and performed a gentleman's bow before smiling warmly at him again. I can gift you with powers. Powers far greater than you can imagine. The vision you just saw. That's just one of them. I can grant you more, everything that you ever so desired. I'll give them to you. Ozsh softly spoke with a very gentle voice, tempting Shao Chen with what he can give him. The friendly warm smile returned on his lips. He knew that no orc can resist the temptation of power like their ancestors. What's the catch? Shao Chen quickly replied, which startled Ozsh a bit. It was the first time that an orc was so direct with him. Just swear servitude to me. And me alone. And everything will be yours, Ozsh proudly declared, thinking that he already had Shao Chen under his control. Thanks, but no thanks. I have multiple ways of gaining power. Wealth, I can accumulate them easily. Better luck next time, Shao Chen replied while shaking his head and started moving around the grand hall, seeking for a path to get out. The great Ozsh was speechless. He stared at the curious orc roaming around his abode, curiously knocking on the walls and floors trying to look for something. Unconvinced, Ozsh tried peeking into Shao Chen's past and saw the great tragedy that befall upon him. Ozsh witnessed Shao Chen's life, from his birth till his death, and a devious smile quickly formed upon his lips. Ozsh muttered an incantation and Shao Chen's vision changed. He witnessed his past life playing like a movie in front of him. The emotions that he so deeply hid within the depths of his mind started surfacing again. Yes. Yes, that's it. Be consumed by your anger and hatred. Seek vengeance for the injustice that you went through. Ozsh's whispering voice echoed upon Shao Chen's ears. Shao Chen's eyes started glowing bloody red, just like the orcs that fought the ice behemoths. Madness was consuming his mind. He was thirsting for vengeance. He wants those that did him the unthinkable to suffer the pain that he went through. Ha ha ha. Oz was laughing victoriously as Xiao Chen was struggling to keep his sanity in check. He was clutching his head in pain and knelt down on the golden floor. He was enduring immense pain that scorched both his soul and body. He was feeling an alternating abysmal cold and fiery hell, both making him feel excruciating pain like no other. Arg! Xiao Chen screamed in pain at the top of his lungs, trying to regain control of himself. He was thrashing around the majestic hall, destroying anything that he touches, bloody red haze radiating from his eyes. Oz was relishing the sweet taste of Xiao Chen's suffering. He was feeding off from the madness that was slowly consuming the orc. It won't be long now. Struggle as you might, you will never erase the hatred, pain and negative emotions that you have, no matter how deep you bury them within yourself. Oz sat down on his throne, a mocking smirk was etched on his lips as he watches Xiao Chen on his futile struggle. The great demon can feel it, the orc was nearing his limits of trying to break free from his grasp, just a little bit more and the orc was his. The tragic fate that Xiao Chen experienced played in a loop within his mind, making feel the pain of being betrayed over and over again. He saw those who have betrayed him, laughing victoriously at what they have done. They received bountiful rewards after betraying him, the one he so dearly cared for even spat on his grave telling him how useless he is. Arg! All lies. Everything is a lie. They must suffer. They must pay for their betrayal. Xiao Chen screamed, rolling around on the golden floors while clutching his head in pain. His face started bleeding from him trying to claw onto his head, trying to get rid of the pain. The things that kept playing over and over again within his head was driving him crazy, it was eating at his soul. It was like something or someone was tugging on his soul, trying to pull it out of its vessel. His vision was starting to crumble, he was slowly sinking into the abyss of eternal darkness. Chapter 37 You are listening at novelfull.audio. BVEC, unknown entity detected. Hostile intentions. Detected. Scanning catalog error. Scanning for possible matches. Possible match found. Category. Demon, initiating countermeasures. Invoking the spirit of Guratsa. Oz was patiently waiting for Xiao Chen's will to finally crumble to nothingness, for his consciousness to fall into the eternal abyss, never to awaken again. Guz, Dar, Sok, Dum, Shad, Hes, the demon of madness. Oz began reciting an incantation while inscribing demonic runes upon the body of Xiao Chen. The runes that will allow him to possess the orc's body and descend upon the mortal plane, the world of Asgalar, where he can wreak havoc as much as he pleases. In the old world of the orcs, he didn't get much time to rampage around since that world was on the brink of destruction upon his second descent. Ha ha ha, fall into the abyss and be my vessel. I will let your kind dominate Asgalar after I have my fun. Mwahahaha. The demon with leopard-like spots on his body kept on laughing maniacally, he was already assured of the orc's demise. Roarf. Xiao Chen slowly stood up, the bloody red haze on his eyes slowly dwindling away, returning tranquility upon them. Oz felt his hold upon the orc's soul slowly diminishing, his demonic energy ebbing away into the abyss. His demonic magic starting to crumble into air, and the backslash of using so much of his demonic powers gnawed at his very core. Dropping down on one knee, Oz started panting heavily like he just run for many days continuously. The demon clutched upon his right chest where his demonic core was at, he was bearing immense weakness and pain. His demonic power was leaking into the surroundings and his body slowly withering, the supple flesh that covered his body started cracking in many places, revealing the hideous appearance that it had hidden underneath. What have you done? My power. The power that I painstakingly gathered for hundreds of years. My beauty. Gone. Oz glanced at the still immobile orc with so much hatred that hellfire blazed out from his eyes. Tearing apart the amicable form that he had put on and revealed what he truly looks like. A Felid-like face full of savagery and madness, sharp and dangerous scales emerging from his spine. A mouth full of razor-sharp teeth, eyes blazing with hellfire, the antler-like looking horns changed into sharp curled horns dotted with small horns like a barbed wire, and another set of horns grew from his cheeks and curled forward like an elephant's tusks. "I'll imprison your soul and torture you for all eternity," Oz angrily bellowed as he charged toward Shao Chen, a spear suddenly materialized on his hands. The demon's weapon had a spearhead burning with hellfire and emitted so much heat that the surroundings started to melt. "Humph! Can't recognize your old foe now, Zarudin the Red-Fist Warlock. Or should I say, Oz, a trickster demon." Shao Chen snorted and grabbed the air in front of him, a bone sword materializing upon his grip. The bone sword emitted the same hellfire like Oz's spear. On the top side of the bone sword was a serrated edge like that of a saw but still screamed of danger much like its sharp bottom edge. The infernal dragon blade. Oz stopped in his tracks and reeled back in fear. He still could vividly remember the memory of his last vessel that was slain, the warlock of the Red Fist tribe, Zarudin. He still could feel how the hellfire burnt his very soul, the excruciating pain that it had made him endure. "Good, you still remembered," the orc smirked at the demon who was staring at him in fear. Taking a glance at his favored weapon, he slowly approached the panicking demon. "Guratsa, but how? I witnessed how you fell, torn to pieces by Fallion and your horde, slaughtered by the fellhounds." Oz was so confused on how the orc demon slayer had appeared on his abode. His hand started to tremble, his grip upon his spear loosening as he continuously stepped backward for each step forward that the orc took. Guratsa's demon-slaying reputation terrified all the demons, even the great demon lords and the demon kings feared him. For many times he had slayed them, the only advantage that the greater demons possessed was that Guratsa's weapon was incomplete. His infernal dragon blade could only wound their souls but can never destroy it. For many seasons he hunted the demons along with his horde, protecting his kind as they make their escape from their old world that was slowly dying. The orc continued approaching the terrified demon, but suddenly, he felt weak and knelt down on the ground and vomited blood. Oz stared at the orc demon slayer, fearing that it was just an act to bait him to let his guard down. For a few moments, there was nothing but silence and the scalding heat that was originating from the two weapons that emitted hellfire. A sudden thought finally dawned upon the great demon. He charged forth with all his power to probe the orc in front of him. With his sudden strike, the orc was thrown back and crashed upon the walls of his hall, barely deflecting his strike. "Ha ha ha. Now I get it. You are just borrowing this orc's body as a vessel and your power was too much for him to endure. Now I will make you grovel before me, mwahaha." Oz laughed maniacally as he continued attacking Guratsa's vessel, inflicting severe wounds upon the orc's body. Relishing upon the thought of finally overcoming one of his greatest fears and defeating the fabled orc demon hunter that frightened all demons, he strikes with so much vigor that his spear started vibrating upon each impact of his strike. Out of nowhere, the orc slashed at the demon with the serrated side of his weapon, drawing green blood that melted the golden floor upon contact. "Even with limited power, I can still slay a lowly demon like you." Guratsa pointed his sword towards the demon who was startled by his counter and touched his wounded cheeks and stared at the blood on his hands in disbelief. "Rorf!" Oz shouted in anger as he tried to pummel the orc with his spear. "I am a great demon. The great demon of madness." He screamed towards the stumbling orc who was having a hard time deflecting his heavy swings. Being called a lowly demon was one of the things that easily angered him. "When I slayed you, you are nothing but a lowly demon, barely having enough power and surviving bitterly at the bottom of the hierarchy." Guratsa mocked the demon. What he said was the truth. Oz was but just a lowly demon when he first encountered him. He was nothing but a trickster demon who luckily ascended the hierarchy. Filled with anger, Oz recklessly attacked the orc with everything he got. He was unaware that this was nothing but a ploy of the orc to let his guard down. After a heavy strike, dust hampered Oz's vision and he lost sight of the orc. He felt intense burning pain upon his chest. Staring down in confusion at his chest, he saw the infernal dragon blade deeply embedded on his chest. Easily fooled as always, I really wonder if you really originated as a trickster demon. The orc shook his head in contempt of the demon's stupidity, pulling out his weapon and lopping the demon's head off. He stared at the slowly vanishing body in front of him. I will have my revenge. Sooner or later, you hear me? Oz's soul screamed before disappearing completely and returning back to where it came from. Blah. 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 The orc mocked the vanishing soul of Oz, mimicking the movement of a mouth with his left hand. Guratsa's spirit slowly faded away as Shao Chen finally regained his consciousness. Everything happened like a dream to him, but the severe wounds that was inflicted upon his body was still there, which convinced him that everything that just happened was real. Gurkhan, the other commanders and the Johan 1st Battalion were distressed at what they are witnessing. Their strong chieftain suddenly howling in pain, rolling around on the ground and clawing at his head like he was trying to get rid of something, his eyes glowing with a red haze. They didn't know what was happening, nor do they know what to do to aid their chieftain. As severe wounds started suddenly emerging from the chieftain's body, they were starting to panic and started scouring the woods for the presence of any enemy that might be attacking the chief through magic. For hours they had searched high and low but found nothing but remnants of the fleeing goblins who were mercilessly slaughtered after being suspected to be the one attacking the chief. They patiently waited at the edge of their sanity as their chieftain fought the unseen enemy until finally he glanced at them. The red haze that was on his eyes faded. Chief. Gurkhan nervously asked their chieftain, who only smiled back at him before slumping down on the ground motionless. The loyal orc anxiously approached Shao Chen's body and put his hand in front of the chief's nose. He felt warm air coming from them. Relieved that the chieftain was still breathing, he yelled towards his men to quickly carry the chief and bring him to safety, as they still aren't entirely sure that the goblins won't come back in greater number seeking vengeance for their fallen brethren. Chapter 38. You are listening at novelfull.audio. With Shao Chen knocked out cold after his body underwent so much strain, his warriors started retracing their steps back towards the entrance of the forest. After finding a good, wide and flat ground and having ample rest, Sakharin took command of the Johan 1st Battalion and applied what the chief had taught them. Dig faster, we don't know when the goblins will come for revenge. Sakharin bellowed towards the warriors of Johan as they dug a ditch around their chosen camp. Trotdar and Gurkhan took with them their groups to gather timber for the walls and firewood to cook their meals, while Drigana's group kept watch for any incoming danger. The Black Tortoise group dug as fast as they could. The sky seems to be aiding them as it began raining hard. The hard ground starting to become soft as time goes on. Put your backs onto it, strike the ground like your life depends on it. Sakharin continued to shout commands as he struck the ground with all his might with a pickaxe. Baskets were soon passed around to carry the dug soil and carried towards where the walls would be erected. A mound of dirt and soil soon piled up as they finally were able to make a 6x6 deep and wide ditch surrounding the campsite. Shao Chen's commanders were all feeling nervous with the absence of their chief to give commands. It was the first time for them to take the initiative and try to apply what the chieftain had taught them. A few hours later, the Azure Dragon and White Tiger group came back, and on their shoulders were logs for the walls and firewood for their meals. They began erecting the walls, glancing around from time to time to check their surroundings. Fear, confusion and anxiety had taken a hold on them as their chieftain was out of commission. Chief, you need to get well quickly. We your warriors are lost, we need you. We need you to guide us, to be the pillar that erects and binds us together. I need you. Drigana whispered unto Shao Chen's ears as she laid the chieftain upon her lap beside a fire inside the central tent. She was more nervous than any of the other commanders. The chieftain's well-being, she had to be first to know of it. She even snarled at Gurkhan, who tried to replace her on taking care of the chieftain. She didn't understand herself very well. The only thing she cared about was the chieftain getting back on his own 2 feet and taking command of them, guiding them and becoming their beacon of hope for a brighter future. The emotional female orc didn't know what she was experiencing. She felt confused and misjudged what she felt to be just an undying loyalty to the chief. Female orcs rarely express their emotions towards the opposite gender, almost all the time, it was the male expressing their intention to be their mate, and if the female approves then they will be together. The long ears were famed for being eternal lovers due to their long life spans which could reach 1,000 of years, but it wasn't known that it was actually the female orcs who are eternal lovers. They love till their death. They fall in love too deeply that they can never get out of it, even foregoing marrying if it wasn't the one they fall in love with would be their partner. Orcs are brutes and savage warriors. That was the common thing that the other races deemed them to be, but they also possessed such complex emotions just like them. They are not some mindless beasts that acts upon instinct, they possess all the emotions available to other races. Garunna, I pray to you. Help the chieftain to recover quickly. Heal him of whatever illness had fallen upon him. Drigana prayed with her heart towards the Orcish goddess of life, tears suddenly smearing her cheeks without her noticing. It was the first time that she revealed such a fragile state. Most of the time she would be screaming at her enemies, relishing upon their agonizing howls as she dismembers their limbs and bathing on their blood. Raising the flaps of the chieftain's tent and taking a look inside, Gurkhan witnessed Drigana's delicate state. Shaking his head in understanding, he lowered the tent's flaps and continued to guard the entrance and giving the emotionally unstable female orc some private time with the chief. Staring at the dark clouds covering the sky, raindrops trickling down his cheeks, Gurkhan prayed to the gods watching over them that they protect them from unforeseen harm and aid the chieftain upon his recovery. Confined within their tents because of the heavy rain, the warriors of Johan were at a loss. Their recent victory against the goblins, they can't feel it. It was like they were the ones who lost the engagement because of the chief's situation. Straining his eyes to try and have a clear sight of the woods up ahead at all times, Sakharin patiently kept watch. Alongside him was the muscle-head Galanor, who also can't stay still after seeing Xiao Chen's situation. The muscle-head was also feeling distressed on the current situation. Thunder roared and lightning flashed from time to time as the Johan 1st Battalion continued to wait for any news about their chieftain. Ugh! Xiao Chen muttered as he clutched his head in pain. It was like he was having a very terrible headache. Looking down on his body that was smeared with medicinal paste, he can't help but smile wryly to himself. Demons! Guratsa! The old orc world, Farandil. He softly muttered to himself, gathering his thoughts together and clearing his mind of the confusing knowledge that he just acquired after his out-of-this-world experience. Xiao Chen felt a warm sensation on his legs. Curious on what might be producing such warmth, he strained his eyes to adjust to the darkness that engulfed his surroundings. There he saw the fast-asleep Drigana by his legs just beside his bed made up of straw and quilt from Therian hides. Xiao Chen didn't have any memories of what happened after he smiled towards the worried Gurkhan. He awoke from the trance that the demon had subjected him to after being defeated by Guratsa's spirit. After that everything was blank to him. He didn't know who carried him nor where he is at exactly right now, but at least he knew who took good care of him while he was out cold due to the aftereffects of Oz's doing. Stretching his limbs, immense pain assaulted his senses as some of the scabs that covered his wounds broke apart. Fresh blood started to ooze out upon the cracks of his scabs. Drigana's nose twitched a bit upon the scent of fresh blood. Alert and ready she opened her eyes. Raising her head up she came eye to eye with the chieftain. Reeling back in surprise, she almost crashed against the central wooden post that held the tent. Chief. You're finally awake. She said with a tint of excitement upon her voice, but then she remembered the things she said while the chief was on his bed. A red hue emerged from her cheeks because of embarrassment as she was worried that the chief might have heard everything that she had spoken. Ugh, yes, I'm finally awake, Xiao Chen muttered dumbly as he stared in confusion towards the embarrassed female warrior in front of him. What exactly happened? While I was knocked out, he screamed within his mind. Smiling wryly towards Drigana, what's our current situation? He asked quickly to escape from the awkward situation that they were in. We had taken camp just outside the woods. Sakharin ordered the warriors to erect what you call a fort to protect us from any sudden counter-attack from the goblins, Drigana answered slowly with her head still looking down on the ground. Her cheeks still felt hot and the red hue upon them was still apparent. Chapter 39. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Upon sunrise, Xiao Chen struggled up on his own 2 feet despite feeling weak, his steps a little bit unsteady, swaying side to side like a drunk person. Don't force yourself, Chief. Drigana worriedly helped the chieftain to be steady on his feet by leaning him on her shoulders, supporting his weight as they walked slowly towards the tent's entrance. Ugh, that I need to make the warriors know that I am still alive and kicking. Their morale should be at an all-time low right now because of what happened to me. They require my presence, albeit just a weak one. I need to boost their morale and let them know that their chieftain still hasn't kicked the bucket yet. Xiao Chen grimaced in pain as he spoke due to some of his scabbed wounds being torn by his movements. Helplessly, the female orc gave up on the idea of convincing the chief to remain bound on his bed. Gurkhan. I know you're there, help me with supporting the chief, Drigana shouted towards the outside, and right on cue, Gurkhan raised the tent's flaps and revealed his face, an excited smile upon his face. Chief. Gurkhan excitedly approached Xiao Chen and proceeded to support him on the chieftain's left side while Drigana was on the chieftain's right. Slowly the two supported their chief towards the central part of the camp where there was a raised platform made of dirt and wooden slabs. Steadying himself upon the raised platform with a spear that he grabbed from a weapon rack that they passed by, he basks upon the warmth rays of the rising sun. The warriors of Johan just came back from their daily run and are jogging in formation towards the center of the camp where they did their daily physical conditioning. Look! It's the chief. Over there. The chief. It's the chieftain. The warriors of Johan who spotted Xiao Chen started murmuring, and the others glanced towards where their chieftain was at after hearing the murmurs of their peers. There they saw him, standing majestically as the early rays of the rising sun shined upon his back, like a god that just descended announcing his arrival. Xiao Chen glanced over his warriors with pride. Despite his absence, they still continued on with their daily routine of physical conditioning. Ready. Salute. Sakharin bellowed loudly, and in an almost perfect synchronized movement, the warriors of Johan thumped their closed fist towards the chief. The sound of their fist hitting their chest echoed through the camp. Turning around towards Xiao Chen, Sakharin performed a salute towards the chieftain before turning around and giving command to the warriors of Johan to be at attention. Apologies for making you all worry. But as you see that your chieftain is still well and alive. Prepare yourselves, for we will be assaulting the goblin's nest after 3 days, and I will personally lead you to battle. Warriors of Johan, awoo. 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 The warriors of Johan enthusiastically replied to their chieftain as they are all excited for battle once again, and excited because the chieftain will be personally leading them. The warriors belonging to the White Tiger group had a knowing smile upon their faces since they already experienced the honor of being personally witnessing the chieftain's battle prowess up close and personal. Turning around and proceeding towards his tent, Xiao Chen walked with a steady composure, but his body was screaming in pain. Gritting his teeth he endured it, and after almost reaching his tent, he almost collapsed, but luckily Gurkhan and Drigana quickly supported him. After 3 days of rest, Xiao Chen's wounds finally healed and allowed him to move freely. His strength had all returned to him now. Donning on his battle equipment, Xiao Chen walked towards the assembled Johan 1st Battalion, who were all ready and eager for another exciting battle. Nodding towards Sakharin to begin the march, the Johan 1st Battalion started their journey towards the forest. They were all on high alert and glanced left and right from time to time. Their hands itching to unsheath their blades and their eager smile upon their lips, excitedly waiting for the goblins to ambush them. A few hours into the woods, the noisy shrieking battle cries of the goblins reverberated through the air as they poured out from the tree lines, waving their weapons in the air as they charged forward. Battle formations. Xiao Chen bellowed, and the battle band quickly relayed his command. Tightly gripping their shields and their swords drawn out, the Johan 1st Battalion quickly formed a tight box formation per platoon. With the momentum of their charge, the goblins heavily crashed against the towering wall of shields. The unlucky ones directly went out cold as they weren't able to stop their momentum after the shields were placed towards their path. "Is that all you got?" An orc yelled towards the goblins as they tried to push him backwards and pry his shield away from him, skidding on the muddy ground while his muscles bulged as he pushed back the pesky goblins who were trying to overpower him with their combined strength. "Establish a line. Hold. Hold." Sakharin and the other commanders bellowed as they repelled the initial charge of the goblins with their shields. Slowly their formation became tighter as they were pushed back and overpowered by the combined strength of the goblins. With the help of those behind them, pushing back the orcs finally were able to stable their formation. "Now!" The commanders shouted and the shields were rammed towards the excited goblins who thought that they could finally overrun the formation of the orcs. With the sudden counter-attack, the goblins stumbled backwards, some even soared through the air and collided with their brethren, the others heavily crashed on the ground before being unluckily trampled by their kin to death who were still frantically charging forward. Steadily the orcs moved forward and expanding their tightened formation a bit, slaughtering any goblin that came within their weapons' reach. The goblins scaled the tree branches and swung themselves towards the formation of the orcs only to be met with the pointed end of a sword or a spear. The lucky ones successfully arrived at the formation of the orcs without being killed outright, began to wreak havoc only to be squashed quickly by the orc closest to them. Xiao Chen had prepared his men for such kind of sneak attacks since they were going through the woods, and luckily the dumb goblins are only employing such tactics now. The huge numbers of the goblins thinned quickly as they recklessly charged forward towards the orcs who were like a meat grinder, tearing them apart. Excitement was etched upon the face of the orcs as they killed the goblins. Some orcs even started throwing goblin corpses towards their enemies who were hesitant in approaching them in their formation. Taking a glimpse at the still hesitant goblins, Xiao Chen smiled victoriously. The battle was theirs for the taking, just a little bit more. "Awoo!" He roared towards the sky as loud as he can, his deep voice echoing upon the woods, and caught the attention of his warriors and their enemies. "Awoo! Awoo! Awoo!" The Johan 1st Battalion excitedly replied to their chieftain's roar as they banged their weapons upon their shields and patiently inched forward towards the hesitating goblins before piercing them quickly with their weapons as they were in their weapons' range. Like a tidal wave that arrived, the goblins also receded as such, scampering away in great numbers after being subjected to Xiao Chen's psychological tactic. Chapter 40. You are listening at novelfull.audio. For the next few days, the Johan 1st Battalion kept getting attacked by huge numbers of goblins. Fatigue began to build up among the orc warriors as they have been fighting constantly without sufficient rest. "Rorf! Take this and this and this." An orc warrior belonging to the Azure Dragon group kept pouring out all his frustrations as he dismembered the poor goblin to small pieces. "Keep it together, warrior. We have more enemies to kill. Save your energy. You'll need all that you can muster." Xiao Chen approached the frustrated orc and gently tugged him by the shoulder to express his understanding of the warrior's frustration. "Ugh! Forgive me, chief, that I was just getting incensed by the goblins' continuous attacks." The orc warrior apologized to the chieftain and bowed his head before returning to where his peers were at. Nodding towards the obviously tired warriors of his, he went forward towards where the battle was still heated. "Galamnor, smash! Smash! And smash some more!" Galamnor bellowed as he crashed the little goblins with his two huge fists, his weapon already wrecked after suffering many heavy recoils from the huge orc's attacks. Grabbing, punching and throwing the goblins, the huge orc went on a rampage as he thrashed the unlucky goblins that came within his range. Black wind howled towards the sky as he lunged at every goblin that came too close to Sakharin, clawing and biting them, shredding them apart ferociously. Her furs were now covered with plenty of goblin blood and bits and pieces of goblin flesh. "Many thanks, partner." Sakharin patted Blackwind's snout as the fierce warg continued to guard his rear while he battled the goblins charging at him. He was already panting heavily, but he persevered to inspire the warriors around him to keep on fighting and don't let up. This is getting ridiculous. Their numbers are endless. Trotdar complained as he tossed anything that he can get his hands on at the goblins. You're right. This isn't a normal goblin swarm anymore, Gurkhan commented by the side as he slammed a goblin right in the face with his shield before stabbing it multiple times to ensure that it won't get up ever again. Rorf. Come. My axe thirsts for more blood. Eroshana shouted towards at the goblins, taunting them to come towards her more. Blood-red haze starting to appear on her eyes but much more subtle than what Xiao Chen had experienced. Like a storm, Eroshana massacred the goblins that dared to attack her or just unknowingly got within her range. She was like a demon, merciless and cruel on her slaughter, bathed with goblin blood and goblin flesh, she wreaks havoc among the goblin swarm. Inspired by their commander's actions, the warriors of Johann attack with more vigor as they pushed back the goblins after being driven back by the sheer number of the goblins that assaulted them. For honor. For glory. For the Horde. Xiao Chen rallied his troops, raising his spear up on the air. He impaled a goblin with it before raising his weapon up again with the goblin corpse and flinging it away. For the chief. For Johann. The warriors of Johann enthusiastically replied to Xiao Chen's rallying cry as they banged their shields with their weapons while advancing towards the goblins. The warriors of Johann cheered as they have yet won again another battle against the goblins. They shouted their lungs out, letting out all their emotions, their frustrations and fatigue. How many brave warriors fell this time? Xiao Chen questioned with an angry look on his face. He wasn't angry with his warriors' performance but with the goblins and himself. Almost 200 of his soldiers had already fallen victim to the goblins' ploys, like traps and sudden ambushes from unsuspecting places. We haven't finished checking the numbers yet, Chief, but it is estimated to be close to 100. Gurkhan didn't know how to respond properly as he was also dismayed by the numbers of comrades that they had lost. Those he had trained and suffered with, he witnessed their demise as goblins piled up on them before going silent and motionless. He still remembered their smiles of satisfaction as they savored the unique taste of their chieftain's gifts, the tasty prime beef meat. Their painful grunts as they suffered through the early days of their physical training, their voice of complaints, their dissatisfied faces and the words of encouragement that they have spoken. Gather the corpses of the fallen. We'll give them the proper honor of a brave warrior, Xiao Chen said with a tint of sadness upon his voice before going away somewhere that he can be alone at. His chest tightened with pain, his feet were heavy as he slowly walks, his shoulders stoop low unbecoming of the grand posture of a warrior that he had taught his men to, his eyes starting to moist up and hands tightly clenched into a fist. Sitting down on a big rock, he started reflecting on the things that happened, his emotions in turmoil. He knew, sacrifices needed to be made but still, it pains him to lose warriors under his command. He felt like their deaths were his doing since it was his decision that caused it. The lives of his warriors were deeply relying on his right decisions. Xiao Chen was blaming himself as always, every warrior that had fallen, he remembered them. He had kept a close eye on them when they trained, when they suffered under his command. All the pain that they went through, he was familiar with it since he had also undergone such suffering but much more. Behind a tree, someone was watching the chieftain in deep thoughts. She was worried that the chieftain will do something harmful to himself and also to guard against any sneak attacks by the goblins while the chieftain was lost in his own deep thoughts. She watched in silence as tears started to slide down the chieftain's cheeks, his sadness she felt it. The silent yet emotional breakdown of the chief, she witnessed it. Dutifully she just kept watch despite her emotions were also starting to get shaken up as she watched him broke down. Gone was the prestigious, well-respected, tough, strong and perfect facade of the chieftain, what was left was that of a normal warrior who grieved for the passing of his brothers. Xiao Chen looked up to the skies with tears smearing his cheeks, silently he kept mumbling within his mind, "What have I done wrong?" The clouds just sailed through the sky without giving him any answer as the passing wind caressed his cheeks and made his long hair flutter.